Alright guys, welcome back. So, we have this nice little punch animation and, as soon as we get close, we can actually punch that and it works exactly as intended. But there's a problem with this. And to highlight the problem, I'm actually going to make the collision box visible. So I'm going to open this, go to my viewport, and I'm going to take this collision box, this left collision, and what I'm going to go do is go to rendering and switch off hidden in game. So by default, the collision box is hidden in game, but I want to make it visible, so I've checked this off. Right, I'm going to press save, and now we can see the collision box in the game. So this is great, and as we go close, as you can see, we can punch it. That's great, but there's another problem with this, right? So watch this. If I get really close, okay, and I punch, as you can see, even before the punch loads, as the player moves his hand up, the box has already been hit, and that's because the game doesn't know when the punch has started. I mean, as soon as you press the left control key and the animation begins, then the game thinks the punch is on. So even when the character is lifting his hand, all of a sudden, the impact is still being felt by anything he hits. So what we're going to do now is we're going to figure out a way to make sure that there is a zone in the punch where there is maximum impact and that no damage or no impact should be felt before that. So let's do that, right? Let's go into our third person BP. Actually, let's go into our Deliman and let's find the punching animations. So if you look at this animation, we'll see that, obviously we shouldn't deal damage here because he's not started punching yet, but I think this is a good area for you to start dealing damage. And I think we should deal it till here and then back. So it should only be, the punch should only be active from here to here, right? So let's do that. What we'll do is we'll right click here and we click on add notify. Right, let's call this punch underscore begin. Right, and let's continue. I think this is the end of the punch. We'll add notify and call it punch underscore end. So a notification means that you'll be able to use these events in your animation blueprint, both these events. Right, so look at that, that's beautiful. Right, so saving. And we'll make sure that nothing happens during these periods, right? Although the animation is still played, no impact is felt during either this period or this period. So saving, and what we're going to do is now we're going to go to our animation blueprint, right? So we'll go to our animation blueprint, we'll go to the event graph, and what we'll do is you'll realize that when you right click and you look for punch underscore begin, you have a new notify event. This is something new we've just created. And there'll be punch underscore end, which we've created. So let's see. What were they called? Yeah, punch underscore begin and punch underscore end. So we've got punch underscore begin and punch underscore end. Now what we want to do is we want to be able to go to our, or be able to signify to our third person character that, well, the punch has began, and when the punch ends, that the punch has actually ended. Now let's go back to our third person BP. Let's open the third person character, and we have this variable called is punching. Now this is punching variable is a private variable, right? It says variable is not public and will not be editable on an instance of this blueprint. So you actually can read this variable from wherever you want, but you can't write to this variable, you can't set it. So what I want to do is I want to be able to set a new variable and not have it, have that variable set throughout the entire punch, but only during or only between begin and end. So what I want to do is I'm going to create a new variable. I'm going to call it is punch peak zone. Right? Yeah. So let's do this. Let's keep it Boolean and let's make this let's just open this I here. So it's a public variable. So now I can set it from anywhere, not just get it. Until now, we've just been getting variables, right? We've just been getting all of this. And when we set the variable here, we had to make a local version of that variable. But here, we don't need to make a local version because we made this public, right? So we can actually set this variable directly. So we'll go here. And what we'll do is we will obviously cast to third person character. And we'll duplicate that. Right. Now, instead of doing this again and again and again, I think when we do event blueprint begin play, so when the play starts, we'll just do this. And this is a method of abstraction, right, where instead of repeating the same code again and again, actually it's do not repeat yourself, which is an object-oriented programming principle. If that confuses you, don't worry. It just means we want to make our work as easy as possible by making sure that any repeatable pieces of code are made into just one segment, right? So I am going to, the object, we'll do try get pawn owner, right? This is the object, and we will click on promote to variable. So we'll just make this a variable, and we'll call it, well, TPC, which is our third person character. Okay, so let's move this up, setting TPC. Right, so now we don't have to repeat all this code. We'd have to originally, but now we can just say, well, get the TPC, and we will set the value of punch is punch peak zone. We can just set it, and we're going to set that to be true as soon as the punch begins, and we can set this to be false as soon as the punch ends. Right? You see how convenient we've made it? You see why we're not repeating all this code once again, right? Just by setting it once at the beginning of the play. So cool. So we have this going on where when the punch happens, then a variable is lit up here, and when the punch ends, it's lit up. It stops here. And remember, this is not throughout the entire punch. This is only in that peak zone that comes from the notifies. Right. So in this part, now what we're going to do is we are just going to check event tick, which is every single frame of the game. What we're going to do is we are going to check this is punch peak zone. We're going to check that. So we know how to check that. We branch, which means an if condition. So we're checking if this is punch peak zone. We're checking if it's true. If it's true, then what we're going to do is we're going to say print string, and we're going to say punch peak zone. Punch, doesn't matter. All right, so that's what we're going to do, and we're going to play. We'll see that, you see, only once we raise our hand until the end of the punch peak zone was shown, and that's exactly what we expect it to be. Cool. So we're going to go back in, and we're going to delete this. We don't want that anymore. Now what we want to do is we want to see that if during this period where the punch peak zone was happening, if there was any sort of collision that happened, right, with any object. So we'll drag this left collision here, okay, and we'll ask it is overlapping. Actually, we'll do get overlapping actors. We'll find out all the actors that this left collision box was overlapping with while the peak punch zone was going on. We'll get all of those actors. We'll get the list of all of those actors. And unlike all the other things that we've used right now, this command returns an array. An array is basically not just one element, but an entire group of elements. So it could be, instead of one variable, you have a group of variables that an array has. So when I pull out of this, I can actually say, well, array length, right? So I want to know how many elements this was. And for those of you that don't understand what an array is, we'll go to paint, and I'll show you what an array is. Think of an array like a box. Right? And for those of you that do know what an array is, feel free to just skip forward. Right? So in this box, I want to start adding some stuff inside. Maybe I want to add 10 floats, 10 different float values. Right? So this is an array of floats. One of the float values could have a value of 5.3. The second one could have a value of 5.1. The third one could add a value of 10.0. and so on and so forth, right? You can keep going, 11.3, so on, so you can keep going. Now the length of this array, actually arrays start from 0, okay? The index of this array is 0. So if this array was called A, then A of 0 is 5.3. A of 1 is 5.1. So you actually refer to arrays like this. This is 2, this is 3, and so on and so forth. And the total length of this array is not 3, it's 4. The total length is basically how many elements there are in the array, which is 4, right? So you have A1, A2, A3, and 1, 2, 3, and 4. There are 4 elements in this array, right? And this is an array of floats. And you can have an array of anything. You can have an array of integers, you can have an array of strings. In our case here, we have an array of overlapping actors. So it's an array of objects. So if I go back here, you can see that this thing that you see here, this represents an array. It's an array of actor object references, right? So it's basically this, and it's all the overlapping actors that this might have come in contact with. So it might be, box, that box we might have come in contact with. Now, obviously, when you're overlapping something, you can overlap multiple things because technically you can go through things. So if there are 2 boxes next to each other, then it could be box 1 and box 2. Right? So it's an entire list of things, and what we want to do is we want to find out whether this length, which is the total number of items in this box or in this array, is greater than 0. We want to see if it at least has 1 item or whether it's an empty array. We don't want to mess with an empty array. So what we're going to do is we're going to do a branch. Actually, we're going to do greater than, integer greater than integer. We're just going to check if this is greater than 0. That's it, right? So we'll do this, we will do another branch, okay? And as long as the number of overlapping actors is greater than 0, then this condition would have been met. And what we'll do is we will spawn an emitter. We already know how to do that at a location, and the location can be the get world location, okay? So we're just getting the location of this thing in real time, and we are sending that, right? And we maybe make it an explosion. Okay, so this is done. So one thing we need to do is this box will always prevent us from having any overlaps, right? Because when we hit this box, there's no overlap because the box will pretty much fall, and it's a blocking hit. It's called a blocking hit, right? Because it's block all dynamic, doesn't allow any overlaps. So we'll change this box a little bit. We will remove the simulate physics. We will change this from block all dynamic to overlap all dynamic, right? And we will remove this hit event, okay? And what we're also going to do is in our viewport, in our left collision, we'll change the collision settings a little bit, and instead of block all dynamic, which again it prevents any overlaps, we will change this from block all dynamic to pawn, right? Pawn basically means, and I'm just going to scroll over it or hover over it, it can be used for capsule of any player-able character or AI. And these are all just presets, right? These are the things that are applied in the preset. Right? Just going to press save. And the reason we're doing this is because we want this collision box to be able to overlap over this box here. Right? So if you do this now, you'll see that there's a nice little particle effect when the hit happens. Right? And it doesn't happen if you're not near the box. Right? So, but you can also see that because we made it such, your hand is able to go inside the block, right? Because there's overlap now. But we basically got our stuff working, and in the next episode, we're going to figure out how to kind of make this a little better. Catch you then.